All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Amy Wyans. I'm the Executive Director at the Otsego County Conservation Association, and I'm also the tech person for tonight. So we're going to go over the lovely, it wouldn't be a webinar or an online event without some tech. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or the question answer button that you have right there. Everyone will be on mute, and the panelists will actually mute when they're not speaking and then jump back in when it's time. At the end of each panelist speaking, we will actually take just a few minutes for questions. So during their presentations, feel free to pop your questions into the chat box. So with no further ado, I will mute myself and turn things over to Steve Smith to get us started.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'm so glad to be here tonight. This kickoff event is basically a collaborative effort project between the Otsego County Conservation Association, who my office with Mohawk Valley Economic Development District, I'm the executive director, with our community energy engagement program has combined with the Heat Smart Otsego clean heating and cooling program to form what we're talking about tonight, Heat Smart Mohawk Valley, which includes the 6 counties of Oneida, Herkimer, Fulton, Montgomery, Schoharie, and Otsego counties, and Oneida County outside of the city of Utica as they have their own campaign. I'm one of your 3 hosts. Amy Wine has already introduced herself as Executive Director of Otsego County Conservation Association. Our other host and 3rd speaker tonight will be Bennett Sandler, who is our Campaign Director for Heat Smart Mohawk Valley. Our first guest tonight, and we're very honored to have U.S. Congressman Paul Tonko, who is in his 6th term member of the U.S. House of Representatives representing New York's 20th Congressional District, including his hometown of Amsterdam in Montgomery County. Congressman Tonko is a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce and was elected by his peers to serve as chair of the subcommittee on the environment and climate change. Congressman Tonko co-chairs the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition. Prior to serving Congress, Congressman Tonko was the president and CEO of NYSERDA. And before that, he served in the New York State Assembly for 25 years, 15 of which he was chair on the Committee on Energy. So without further ado, U.S. Congressman Paul Tonko. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Steve. And let me start by thanking Bennett Sandler and Heat Smart Mohawk Valley for expanding their operations into Montgomery County and for the opportunity to join this virtual kickoff event. I also thank and recognize NYSERDA, my old stomping grounds, for all of the great work they're doing to make New York the nation's leader on clean energy. What fantastic news here for the Mohawk Valley. I know we all wish we could join together in person, but it's great that even in these uncertain times, events like this one are able to continue. And more importantly, the work that Heat Smart Mohawk Valley is doing is continuing. I am so excited for this campaign to educate and help people and businesses in Montgomery County and throughout the Mohawk Valley decide if clean heating makes sense for them. We know this model has worked well with NYSERDA-funded Solarize campaigns, so it is great that we can expand people's horizons and opportunities into the really exciting and often challenging world of clean heating systems. Far too often, we limit our energy conversations to electricity, but really we need clean energy solutions for so many applications, including those that are involved with the built environment and heating and cooling, important aspects of the work we all do. We know that deploying cost-effective, innovative, and sustainable heating solutions across our nation is going to be one of the biggest challenges in our climate response. Among the end uses in United States homes, space heating is the largest, representing 43% of energy use according to EIA. The heating of residential and commercial buildings is directly responsible for some 9% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. However, because the industry is highly distributed and locally variable, it is particularly difficult to decarbonize. There are hundreds of millions of building units across America, powered by a variety of fuel sources in a variety of climates. The choice to decarbonize each unit involves a unique cost-benefit analysis at the scale of the individual building owner. So it is incredibly important to have a trusted, educational, and technical resource like Smart Heat Mohawk Valley to help overcome these barriers. They're going to help reduce the carbon footprint of buildings throughout the region in a consumer-friendly way that maintains affordable yet reliable service. And I think this is possible today because there have been a lot of improvements, particularly for cold weather climates, in clean heating technologies. But the market and public awareness has not caught up with these innovations. That's one of the reasons last year that I invited an innovative ground source heat pump company as my guest to the State of the Union address. Working together to spread the word is going to enable more people to consider clean heating an option and more contractors to have heat pumps and other low emissions thermal energy technologies ready on demand, since many system replacements occur during emergencies when the existing system breaks. Having additional incentives, whether it's from New York State, an electric utility, or the federal investment with its tax credit, is also going to be critical. On the federal level, I have made a long-term extension of the ITC a top priority, and I am indeed hoping that it's something we're able to accomplish in a future economic recovery package, but sadly that may have to wait until next year. I know our state's ambitious clean energy goals, which I hope the federal government will also adopt, will not be easy to achieve, and frankly, it will only be possible if we accept a long-term framework soon that puts us on a path to achieving these targets with some degree of certainty. That is why, for the past 2 years, the subcommittee I chair in the House has held hearings and met with hundreds of stakeholders to develop a comprehensive approach to our nation's climate response. We have examined policies for every sector of our economy. One of our most important findings has been that the clean energy transition needs to start with an acknowledgement that the targets we're setting, while necessary, will not be easy. We need the full weight of the federal government, working together with states and municipalities and tribes and the private sector and organizations like Smart Heat Mohawk Valley. And we need to start right now. That's why I'm so encouraged by today's kickoff. And the timing of this event could not be better. The House is currently debating an energy bill on the floor. This package is admittedly light on clean heating solutions, but it's an important down payment for future clean energy action if we get the opportunity to act more ambitiously, and hopefully that will be next year. But for the remainder of this year, we're working to find policies that are both meaningful and stand a chance of garnering bipartisan, bicameral support. I want to give a clear-eyed assessment. This bill is not going to stop climate change, but it is an important opportunity to make good and sometimes necessary changes to programs which might make it easier to do a bigger, more ambitious bill in the near future. And this package includes some provisions that I've been pushing for a decade. It would improve and expand the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program, an important program to promote energy efficiency for our low-income neighbors through their low-income household income. These reforms are important regardless of what happens in November, but I believe they have the added benefit of making it easier for the program to implement a large appropriations of funds in the context of a stimulus or recovery package next year. So I do think the House's energy package, while not the totality of what is needed for clean energy, can open up important possibilities for future action. In addition to weatherization, I have authored sections on publicly accessible EV charging infrastructure, wind energy R&D, streamlining distributed energy permitting, codifying scientific integrity policies, recycling and reusing those critical minerals from energy storage systems, and phasing down hydrofluorocarbons, which will be very important, I believe, to move heat pumps to the next generation of low emissions refrigerants. Beyond the pieces I've worked on, there are many other essential bipartisan programs included. ARPA-E reauthorization, important. Energy storage and industrial RD&D. grid modernization grants, and important for this heating discussion, residential energy retrofit rebates, to name just a few. These are just a few areas where I believe we can work together, and I would indeed welcome feedback on how we might be able to get these priorities over that phenomenal finish line this year. Obviously, a lot is going to depend on the Senate. And with the news of Justice Ginsburg's passing, I cannot even venture a guess of how the next weeks and months may play out. But I'd still like to see if reaching agreement on an energy package might indeed be possible. With that said, many of us are also looking forward toward 2021, and that requires planning for all potential election outcomes and those legislative vehicles, like a clean energy-focused economic recovery package, a major infrastructure measure, a comprehensive climate bill, or likely some combination of all these could be on the table. Regardless of what we call it, there is a lot of work to do to be prepared for such an opportunity. And it is important to make certain that we provide NYSERDA and other state agencies the funding and the flexibility, importantly, to get more programs like Smart Heat Mohawk Valley off the ground. So I'm very hopeful that we might have an opportunity to do a bold and ambitious bill next year. And we need to make certain decarbonized heating is part of that discussion. Trying to identify these tough issues, understand their challenges, and find workable solutions has been at the core of what the subcommittee I lead has been doing as we develop our comprehensive approach to promoting clean energy and addressing the climate crisis. As we work to enact as much as we can right now, we've been committed to developing that more ambitious, comprehensive legislation. In January, the Committee, Energy and Commerce, that the subcommittee reports to, released a discussion draft of what we're calling the Clean Future Act. Since then, we've seen the recommendations of the Select Committee in the House on climate change and Vice President Biden's platform, and are working to incorporate these perspectives into our work. Our staff will be spending time over the next few months expanding and improving our current draft, knowing that we need to be ready for any and all possibilities come January. We are committed to continuing to take a rigorous approach and trying to build consensus whenever and wherever possible. And throughout our work, we will continue to consider how to take on the big fundamental questions surrounding our nation's energy transition, like protecting low-income energy consumers, building new infrastructure, addressing historic environmental injustices, and investing in energy innovation while ensuring meaningful emissions reductions, the ultimate goal. We welcome your input in this process and your assistance in the development of policies that are science-based. Let me repeat that, science-based and data-driven. Whether it is our short-term priorities or development of our long-term vision, I look forward to continuing this dialogue and working together in a very strong partnership. And I am very excited to see what Smart Heat Mohawk Valley might be able to accomplish in my home territory. I'm a born and raised in Mohawk Valley guy, and I want to thank Bennett again and all involved in this effort for the invitation to join with you this evening. I wish you the best success and the cleanest outcome and the strong sense of vision that will walk you through some very difficult decision making. Good luck with the project. Great to be with you.
Okay, now I've unmuted myself. Thank you so much, Congressman Tonko. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Donovan Gordon. He is the Director of Clean Heating and Cooling for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA. He leads the New York State's efforts to develop markets that support renewable, high efficiency, and clean thermal systems, including air, ground, and water source heat pumps, solar thermal, and solid biomass heating systems. Donovan is a Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design LEED accredited Green Associate and an International Ground Source Heat Pump Association accredited geothermal installer. I give everybody Mr. Donovan Gordon.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I have to tell you, Bennett, I know this is being taped, so I certainly want to have a copy of this tape to show my kids and grandkids that I spoke on the same stage of, Congressman Tonko, someone of that caliber. So that was really fantastic, and I hope the Congressman has a few minutes to listen to this presentation, because this is sort of following up on some of the things that he said at the federal level, and also hopefully make him proud of what NYSERDA is doing as it relates to clean thermal energy. So I'm going to talk about two things. Our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is a law that was passed last year and went into effect in January, and then our Clean Heat and Cooling New York State Clean Heat Market Development Plan. So you can go to the next slide, please. So just an overview of the CLCPA, as we call it. This is the first climate law. So it codifies some of the goals that were handed down by the governor through various executive orders. So it is now law. So it's extremely aggressive. By 2050, we want to reduce our carbon emissions by 85% from our 1990 levels, and I'll show a slide about that. 100% carbon, zero carbon electricity by 2040, and a commitment to environmental justice, disadvantaged communities, and a just transition. As the Congressman just said, that's extremely important. We can go to the next slide. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to be just giving highlights of the last slide. So this is a sort of a bar chart of the carbon emissions in New York State over the years. So the goal is to reduce our carbon emissions by 85% by 2050 from our 1990 levels, and 40% from the 1990 levels by 2030. So look at this chart. In 1990, we're at about 240 million metric tons of carbon. It went up by 2005, but dropped down to 206 in 2016. By 2030, we need to bring it down to 144, but by 2050, wow, by 36. So you see where we kind of are right now and where we need to be. Significant reduction in carbon emissions. Next slide, please. A lot of this focus, so again, the CLCPA, Climate Leadership and Community Protection. So the community protection side really is focused on disadvantaged communities. And of this law, up to 40% of all the benefits that are derived or invested in clean energy has to go to disadvantaged communities. So we do have a council that we want to prioritize disadvantaged communities. We want to define who they are, what these communities are. So that definition is still being worked on. We want to make sure that anything we do does not adversely impact disadvantaged communities, like putting a plant in a disadvantaged community that actually increases pollution. That's what's been happening in the past, and make sure that there is a just transition, and making sure that again, we reduce emissions in these areas, and also focus on workforce development, which I'll cover in another slide. So we can get into the next slide, please. Yeah, so we want to invest heavily in these communities, clean energy and efficiency programs, where we're, again, well, I'll show you some slides of the investment we're having in that. Most importantly, projects or investments in the areas of housing, workforce development, extremely important, pollution reductions and things of that nature, but economic development and workforce development are two really important aspects. And as I mentioned, 40% of the overall benefits, certainly at a minimum 35% of all the benefits of the investments need to go to disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. This is just, again, an outline of the goals by years. Again, it's codified in law. This is now law. I've sort of gone through this, the 85% reduction. So I want to hone in on the last one, 185 tera-BTUs of on-site savings by 2025. That's where I'm going to spend a lot of my time in the subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Again, I just mentioned it, but I will point out one point on this slide, in that earlier in May, the Department of Public Service Commission in the Department of Public Service issued an order to the utilities. It's called New Efficiency New York, basically giving them about $3.3 billion for energy efficiency, electric and gas efficiency programs, but it included 450, to be more precise, $454 million for incentives specifically for building electrification and heat pumps. You can go to the next slide, please. So as the Congressman mentioned, building is one of the largest sources of emissions in the country. In New York State, it's actually about a third of the carbon emissions in New York State come directly from the heating and cooling of buildings. So building electrification and heat pumps is really the key to reducing carbon emissions in the state. But more importantly, we need to have technology advancement and new business models that help reduce costs and make it more affordable and reliable for New York State residents. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to shift into the New York State statewide heat pump program. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the Public Service Commission issued an order, Department of Public Service, and $444 million were given to the utilities to do heat pump programs for ground source and air source heat pumps. And NYSERDA, we repurposed about $230 million of our Clean Energy Fund monies to develop a market development plan to support the statewide heat pump programs to help them be successful. And that's where I'm going to spend most of the rest of my time talking about the programs and the initiatives that we're going to be doing under that $230 million. Next slide, please. The overall goal, number one, priority is to help the utilities in the state achieve the goals under the New York State program, which is about 3.6 TBTUs, about 130 or so thousand unit installs. Importantly, make electrification solutions available for LMI, in disadvantaged communities. Just so you may or may not know this, but approximately 50% of New York State's residents are classified as LMI. So we don't get there without addressing this market segment. Yes, we want to reduce costs of the equipment, but another real important aspect of what we do and going to do, again, I'm sort of repeating some of what the Congressman said, but we're actually now applying it and doing it. Consumer education, community engagement to build the demand. That's what these Heat Smart programs are about, to help reduce soft costs. Yes, we want to deal with the supply chain and find places where we can have cost reduction, provide technical assistance both to consumers and contractors and engineers on how to advance these technologies. We need to invest in better technologies, improve technologies to help improve performance. I'd love to see Moore's Law apply here, where they get better and cheaper. And equally important to LMI and the education is training. We want to shift to a clean energy economy, and we want to make sure that we train the future workforce to participate in that new economy. Next slide, please. So this slide sort of outlines the investment. So we say 230 million, 229.6. So, you know, let's not argue about $400,000. So we break it into the critical market needs and the total funding. So as you can see, and the initiative. So you can see workforce development, marketing, you know, so on and so forth. So we want to build consumer demand. We want to do training. As you can see, the largest investment on here is the $60.9 million of building consumer demand. But actually, the largest investment we're making is going to be in the top one, workforce. That $38.2 million is specifically for workforce development of building electrification and heat pumps. Our overall investment for workforce development is $100 million, and that's for clean energy. So for training and how to install wind turbines and and solar panels and building operations and maintenance. So the whole spectrum of clean energy workers, we're spending about $100 million. So you can see we are spending, and this is over a 5-year period. So from 2020 through 2025, we'll make these investments. You can go to the next slide, please. So workforce development, again, I mentioned $38.2 million. This is specifically for heat pumps and building electrification. Our target is to train about 14,000 workers, and it's broken down in the bottom there, about 4,200 heat pump installers, and entry-level jobs is key. We want to have sort of a pipeline, career pathing for kids coming out of high school, vocational school, trade schools. We really need the architects and engineers to embrace this, and when they have these jobs, whether it's new construction or retrofits, they advance heat pumps. Right now, they're advancing the traditional systems because that's what they know and are used to operating and designing. Next slide, please. Consumer awareness. Actually, we're now actually the kickoff meeting was today with the utilities to talk about a statewide awareness program that we'll work along with the utilities. I think it's about $19 million we have allocated for this. We're also doing co-branded marketing campaigns with the utilities. We've done one with Central Hudson, with National Grid, NYSERDA. So we're looking to do more of those. We're also doing cooperative advertising and training with manufacturers, distributors, and contractors. So we look forward to doing, and also with these Heat Smart campaigns. So between what we're going to do at the statewide consumer program, the co-op marketing that we want to do with manufacturers, we have several of the major manufacturers now stepping up, saying they want to do marketing, because obviously if we wanted some more heat pumps, they're the beneficiary of it. As I tell everybody, NYSERDA is not in the business of selling heat pumps. We make policy and offer incentives, so this benefits them. And we're also doing consumer awareness in West Chester, which is not specifically relevant to this campaign. Next slide, please. Clean heat and cooling community campaigns. Well, that's what this is. This is the second round. So thank you, Bennett, and crew for coming through on this. And we look to do more of this. And between Scott Smith and Sue Doherty and myself and our contractor Cadmus and others, we are there for you. We want you to succeed. We need you to succeed. You have to succeed. So we're in 1,000%. Next slide, please. Critical tools, I just want to mention here, we just want to develop, one big thing is what we call a pattern book, but basically it's resources that range from market analysis and user guides to just make it easier for consumers to adopt the clean heat solutions as people aren't aware. And even when they become aware and install it, they don't know how to use it properly. So we just want to give them the tools and information that makes it easier for them to adopt it. And once they adopt it, use it properly. Next slide, please. Clean thermal technical assistance. This is what we call our Flex Tech. We offer cost sharing to do engineering studies and design work for feasibility of clean thermal technologies. But also what we're going to include in this is we're going to be offering free screenings. These are high-level screenings for large buildings 10,000 square feet or larger, where they can come in. Again, we'll give a high-level assessment of whether the building is feasible for ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, or VRF, variable refrigerant flow technologies. So we certainly hope, I know I've had several conversations with Bennett on this and others, so we hope that some of your building owners take advantage of this offering. Next slide, please. Next slide, we can go on to that. I just wanted to just get into more information. Again, this is just, again, saying that, talking more about the large screenings, 10,000 square feet. You do have to pay into the system benefits charge. We're funded by that. Schools cannot apply under this, but we do have a separate program for schools, green and clean energy solution programs for P through 12. The next slide, please, it will give you the information on who to contact for the various programs. Andre Davis on my team, there's the website. If you're a building owner that's interested, just go on that website, and the actual forms to fill out is on that site. Next slide, please. Clean thermal district, we're also calling it community style systems. So as we mentioned, we have these really, really aggressive goals now. And the way we're going, we do one here, a couple there, two there, three there. We'll never hit our goals. These are small contractors that are sort of dominating this segment right now. We need large scale installations, almost utility level, community level, where we're doing hundreds, maybe thousands of installations. So we're coming out with a solicitation in about a month and a half. We're actually going to have the draft of the solicitation posted on our website, NYSERDA's website, this Friday for public review and comment. And we hope to launch the program sometime in November. And we're seeking proposals for district community level systems. So we hope to do about 20 what we call scoping studies, where it's just a high level studies and about 8 detailed design. And we hope to provide funding support to 2 demonstration projects, and we're going to allocate up to $4 million for those demonstration projects, about $500,000 each for those design studies. They'll be cost shared, dollar for dollar, and the scoping studies will be $100,000 of NYSERDA funding, no cost sharing. Next slide, please. So clean heat HVAC technology challenges. This we'll call our next gen HVAC challenges. Again, this is just really to find the new technologies, find obviously better products to help reduce distribution losses, address peak issues, advanced peak reduction, reducing thermal storage, and what the Congressman said, try to find the low global warming refrigerants. Our HFCs is the next big thing. We need to have low global warming refrigerants for heat pumps to really take off and make the significant market penetration that we need. Next slide, please. This is a program that's probably come out maybe next week or within the next week or two. It's called Empire Building Challenge and Multifamily Building Demonstrations. One of the real challenges that we have with clean thermal technology is large buildings, high rises, skyscrapers. So this is really designed for the big buildings, more the New York cities, the 30+ stories buildings. So we're reaching out to these large building owners that have a portfolio of large buildings, these large mechanical engineering firms, to present proposals for us to support, to find solutions for big and tall buildings. Next slide, please. Cost reduction strategies. This is a work in project in progress. We have a goal of 2025 to reduce the cost of installation of these solutions by 25%. I think we can beat that. I owe John Rhodes, the chair of Public Service Commission, my strategy by next April. So this is still a work in progress, but costs have got to come down. As the Congressman, we have to make it cheaper and more reliable. So we're working on that. Next slide, please. And low to moderate income, that's significant. As again, I mentioned, 50% or so of our residents are LMI. So we're allocating $31 million to do demonstration projects. That is just a drop in the bucket. That's not a lot of money, given the size of this market, but we do want to develop the foundation for heat pump deployment in this market segment. It is complex. We have the residential, we have the L, which is low income, we have the M, which is the moderate income, we have public housing, which is owned by a public entity, we have private. So it is kind of complex, and we're working through all the different agencies and ownerships to see what model works best, what kind of ownership, and what clean heat solutions actually work best for the different LMI building topologies. Next slide, please. Supply chain development, we're looking from the OEMs, from the manufacturers, to the distributors, to the contractors. where's the value, how much value is being extracted, and where can we get some cost compression. We actually see where in the short term we can make a significant impact on the soft cost reduction, customer acquisition, marketing, permitting. We can help there. Actual equipment costs, I think with volume, if costs should come down, because if you have your fixed costs and you double or quadruple your volume, that should have an impact on cost. So as a manufacturer said to me, show me the demand. If the demand is there, we will retool our shops and give you the product that you want. But if the demand's not there, don't expect much. So if we're saying literally, it's not in this presentation, but we have it in a public document, that to hit our goals by 2030, between 50 and 70% of all heating systems sold and installed need to be heat pumps. And by 2050, between 95% and 100% of all heating systems sold and installed need to be heat pumps. So literally from today on, if you're replacing a heating system, please, let's make it a heat pump, particularly if it's an oil and propane customer. The economics is not as great with gas right now, but there's still almost 2 million homes in New York State still heated with fuel oil and propane. Let's get that low-hanging fruit. And we also want to provide support to businesses, up to about 200 businesses. These are mostly small mom and pop contractors. They don't have the wherewithal or the bandwidth or the skills to develop business plans that they bring to investors or banks to get loans to bulk up and build their business and attract investors to buy into their business. So we want to provide some support to help them with that. That's sort of like, I think the Small Business Association administration has a SCORE, where they provide mentors to small businesses to help them develop, sort of on that type of program that I'd like to envision that. We want to provide that kind of assistance to help businesses grow, because as the businesses grow, they employ people, and that's what we want. And if they employ people, they pay income tax. And that helps the state as well to do more things. So that's really important. Next slide, please. Comfort Homes, this is basically our weatherization program. Before you put a heat pump in, we want to make sure that you weatherize your house, air sealing, insulation, windows, to actually reduce your thermal load. It will reduce your cost, it will reduce the size of the heat pump that you're putting in. And I sort of use this analogy. Now, if you're going to put a solar panel array on your roof, the first thing they tell you to do is check your roof. If your roof is old, you need to put a new roof on there. So what I'm telling folks now, if you put a heat pump, size a heat pump for a leaky building, and you put insulation in it 5 years from now, that heat pump is now oversized. So let's get that out of the way now. Let's, we call it tighten the envelope and right size the heat pump so you're good to go for the next 15 to 20 years. Next slide, please. And we're developing a building electrification roadmap. Actually, we're doing 2 roadmaps. One is called the carbon neutral roadmap, and that's taking a look at policy needs, recommendations to get 2050 goals. That's looking out from now to 2050. And it's looking at the whole spectrum, from building materials to the impact on the grid and all things, because as we electrify, we're putting a strain on the grid. So what type of electrical needs, capacity needs will we have? And that's important. We don't want to have a peak day and fry the grid, for lack of a better phrase, which what happens in summertime. Right now we have a summer peak. If everyone's turned on the air conditioner, once we electrify vehicles and buildings, we will shift it to a winter peak. So we want to be prepared for that. But we're also developing a building electrification roadmap, which takes a look out to 2030, and I'm more specifically involved with that. So that will give us a roadmap of policy recommendations as how we achieve the 40% reduction by 2030. And it's going to take the whole array. I mean, right now, we have to take a look at gas. I mean, how do we wean ourselves off of gas, because we need to, get off of that. But yeah, so those are the 2 roadmaps that's coming, and they're both going to be published by mid next year. Originally, it's supposed to be first quarter next year, but COVID has sort of put the little dent in a lot of people's plans. So it's probably more like by mid-year next year, we'll publish both of those documents. And actually, this document will actually feed the carbon neutral roadmap, because in order to get to our 2050 goal, we have to address building electrification. So this will be a key piece to that. So yes, as you can see, the next slide is my last slide. Thank you very much. You can always reach out to me, but I'm pretty sure Scott Smith is on the line. Reach out to Scott and Bennett. They're your key people with this, but I'm always there for you. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Amy and Steve.
Yes.
It's Paul Tonko, and I have to jump off, unfortunately, to another meeting, but I wanted to honor Donovan's request. And Donovan, please take back a message to NYSERDA that I'm so impressed with what they're doing. I thank Bennett and his team for what they're doing incorporated with NYSERDA, but NYSERDA continues to feed my voice and enable me to speak with a stronger sense of what needs to be done in our clean energy agenda. So thank you one and all. And I have to go, but I appreciated this opportunity, and great work. Great work.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for
We
joining us.
appreciate your work too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Donovan, thank you so much. Do we want to ask any questions for Donovan? If you could just reply to the chat box for Donovan, that would be great. Our next speaker, and we saved the best for last, just kidding, is Bennett Sandler. He's our campaign director for Heat Smart Mohawk Valley. He has been serving as campaign director for Heat Smart Otsego since June of 2018. Then in July of 2020, we formed Heat Smart Mohawk Valley. Previously, Bennett owned a home performance business doing residential and small commercial energy audits, modeling energy savings upgrades to building envelopes and HVAC equipment, and generally teaching building owners about ways to save energy and make their homes safer and more comfortable. Our campaign director for Heat Smart Mohawk Valley, Mr. Bennett Sandler.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm sorry Representative Tonko had to leave. It's great to have him here. I know he's a busy guy, doing lots of great work, and we really appreciate him taking the time out of his schedule to come be with us and give us the federal perspective on what we're all trying to do here. And in the same breath, I'd like to thank Donovan Gordon, Director of Clean Heating and Cooling at NYSERDA, as well, for giving us an overview of both the CLCPA legislation as a really substantial pivot point and market indicator of our need to transition to clean thermal, and all of the diverse interests within clean heating and cooling and funding to spread out and create a clean energy economy here in New York. I just want to take a second to acknowledge Stephen Smith, who just introduced me, the Executive Director of Mohawk Valley Economic Development District, and Amy Wyant, the Executive Director of OCCA. The three of us have worked very hard together to do to pull Heat Smart Mohawk Valley off, and with the help of Scott Smith at NYSERDA and Bianca Shaw at NYSERDA as well, we're very excited to move forward. I want to take a second as well to acknowledge the fact that we have an interestingly diverse audience here this evening, made up of regional stakeholders, municipal leaders, building owners, some previous participants of Heat Smart campaigns, and certainly colleagues from Clean Heating and Cooling and SEEP, as well as contractors and others. So I want to thank everyone. And I also want to use that as an excuse for my somewhat disparate presentation today. I am not giving you the usual consumer-oriented information session around clean heating and cooling or various SEEP initiatives. I really want to highlight a couple of various elements that we're focusing on as we launch Heat Smart Mohawk Valley to try and maximize our reach into sectors that haven't historically been open to the transition. And so to message and reach folks beyond sort of the captured audience that we've had some success in Otsego County reaching through historically. So with that, if you can advance slides, please. I'd sort of mentioned this. Heat Smart Mohawk Valley is really the blending of 3 different NYSERDA programs: clean heating and cooling, community energy engagement, and clean energy communities programs. And we essentially expect to posit ourselves as a one-stop shop for any building owner within the Mohawk Valley region. Next slide, please. I think it's important towards that end to spell out, to identify the fact that there's a common path for all buildings, whether that's a modular home out in some, off the beaten track, or a large commercial building downtown. All buildings really would benefit from going down a path of studying and identifying areas of improvements, evaluating those upgrades, identifying incentives. And I think Donovan just spent quite a bit of time identifying a suite of programs that are making pretty substantial sums of incentives available to building owners across the spectrum. But then also helping building owners identify contractors and find funding. So we're coaches. We're here to coach consumers through this process. And this is the common process that we see all buildings pretty much going through. Now, some buildings may have already had an audit and they don't need to start there. They can start somewhere in the middle. Maybe they got hung up on upgrades or didn't know about incentives or couldn't find a contractor. That's what we expect to be able to help folks move through. Next slide, thanks. So you'll see in the next slide, there's quite a bit of complexity in the way incentives and the pathways through these programs exist for the consumer. And the sort of a principal focus of what we're trying to achieve right now with Heat Smart Mohawk Valley is to simplify the process facing the customer, to help them navigate this process, to educate consumers about the value proposition of clean heating and cooling and clean energy, and to connect those consumers with folks who can help them, who have the expertise and can bring the incentives to bear, as well as bringing financing tools if needed to their project. And ultimately, we need to we not only need to recruit folks into the program, we need to turn them into advocates. We need them to have such a positive experience that they're turning around and telling their neighbors they should get a heat pump. They should have an energy audit. And this is what we seek to do. Next slide, please. So this is, everybody, Congressman Tonko talked about the complexity at the federal level. Donovan's talked about the complexity at the state level. This is the complexity that we are working with where the rubber hits the road, right, at the individual building owner level. And so part of the process that we've been going through is actually trying to map out these pathways for different building sectors. And as you can see here, we've divided these up, mostly following the structure type that you see in the second line there. And that corresponds typically to different programs made available through NYSERDA, either to do energy audits or to help find a partner. Next slide, please. This is just a drill down of the residential sector. As you can see, I'll take a moment just to walk through some of the information that's captured here. But depending on the household income, the audit programs vary and the incentive programs can vary, and the contractor base can vary. And so we really want to be in a position to help as people inquire about what can be done at their house, to help walk them through this this process, to find the right program and the right contractor and the right financing to make this an easy process. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a list, sort of a laundry list of different types of incentive programs that exist, both through NYSERDA, but also the utilities and at the federal level for implementing any number of clean energy upgrades. Next slide. This is really an attempt to sort of graph out the swim lanes, to use the marketing terminology, for these different pathways. And as you can see, depending on your income level, different programs pop up, different incentives pop up. So market rate comfort home pops up. For medium income, the assisted home performance and the 50% cost share program for eligible measures can pop up. Utility rebates are actually going to be available across all of those sectors. We're really trying to capture the complexity of these different elements. And again, as I keep saying, we're trying to make it simple and create an easy pathway for consumers to move through. Next slide, please. I'm going to shift gears at this point. I've got several different elements of the value proposition of clean energy that I really want to take a second to highlight. And the first, as Donovan was saying, getting homes ready for heat pumps, falls under the category of a traditional energy efficiency assessment. And I wanted to share some data. I know this is a somewhat verbose and busy data slide, but I wanted to share with you some analysis that I did from Otsego County, in which I cranked some numbers from both Opportunities for Otsego, who is the Empower and weatherization implementer in Otsego County, and my old home performance with Energy Star business. And we came up with a fairly standard figure. We came very close to each other in terms of coming up with an actual value for what it costs per house to save 1 million BTUs permanently through insulation, air sealing, various mechanical system upgrades. And so we can extrapolate from this and understand what we might be able to achieve across the county, across the Mohawk Valley region, with various investments based on this figure. And to give you some perspective, the table at the bottom shows us what the actual street value of that investment translates to on an annual basis. So that $260 invested in efficiency upgrades by plugging holes of air leaks to the outside and adding insulation to the envelope following the standards put forth through BPI and the Home Performance with Energy Star and Empower program, we can save consumers a fairly known amount of energy. And certainly plugging the holes before we upgrade mechanical systems makes a whole lot of sense. We'll spend a lot less money on the mechanical system replacement if we can reduce the actual heat load of the building. Next slide, please. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the value proposition of heat pumps. I know Donovan just spent some time talking about all the ways in which NYSERDA is investing in market transformation. And certainly clean heating and cooling community campaigns were part of that makeup. But I find it significant to actually take a second and explain the value proposition of heat pumps just from a financial standpoint. And I want to start by contrasting that with what it takes to burn fossil fuels, which is never 100% efficient. To create heat by burning fossil fuels, we always lose some. It's something always less than 100% efficient because something goes up the stack. Something's in the smoke. Electric resistance heat is actually 100% efficient. No matter what the device is, you plug it in, 100% of the electrons that come through the cord are turned into usable heat in the room. But again, you're not moving heat, you're actually creating it by through electric resistance. So you're using all of that energy, but we can do better. And that's using a heat pump. And heat pumps operate at higher efficiencies because they don't create heat, they move heat. And so we use the physical properties of refrigerants and an electric run compressor to move low-grade heat, typically from outside a building, in during the heating season, or heat out of a building when it's the cooling season. The same system can turn right around and do both. And because we're using those physical properties of refrigerants, we actually can achieve efficiencies between 200 and 600% efficient. And that's where the value of heat pumps is. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not giving the usual deep dive into this very specifics of heat pump technology. It's using the refrigeration cycle, which has been around for 80 years. We've talked about the fact that refrigerants are evolving and need to evolve to lower their the global warming potential. And so we have ways to go, but this is proven technology, and it will continue to evolve, but this is not new. We're not early adopters in looking at heat pumps. It's been around for a long time. Our refrigerators and freezers use this technology. And so folks should take some comfort in the fact that this is not really something new to the market. Next slide, please. And this, if there was one data set that I really would, well, there's a couple in here that I want to share with you, but this is the one that I think is most significant. We've talked about incentives, but this is just a slide, a chart for a single building and what different types of heating systems and fuel types cost to heat that same building. Okay, and so you can see, we've cut off the tail at the bottom, or I can't see it. Maybe it's just on my screen. This is the annual cost for this building. Maybe if we just go to the next slide, that's a chart of the data that's available here, right? This is actually what the annual cost is, estimated cost for a building that consumes about 750 gallons of fuel oil a year, and what the predicted energy cost would be using all these different types of fuel systems. The ratio column in this table is actually the annual cost divided by the annual cost of a ground source heat pump system. So the ratio is 1 for ground source heat pump. And if you get down to propane boilers, propane furnace, they're the most expensive and are 3.5 times what a heat pump costs to heat a space. This doesn't include the fact that heat pumps also turn around and do cooling. But I want to impress upon folks that we're looking at something between 2 and 3.5 times annual savings in operational costs by transitioning to heat pumps. There's value before you even get to the incentives. I understand they're expensive to install, and certainly the incentives play a significant role in making that accessible to folks, but these systems operate at significantly less cost while adding comfort, because they do cooling and dehumidification just as much as they can provide space heating. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the fact that there are incentives available for the different elements along the pathway. Free energy audits, there are grants to help implement or pay for insulation and air sealing upgrades. There are utility rebates for heat pumps, federal tax credits for ground source heat pumps, and for solar accelerated depreciation on the commercial end of things. And there are financing packages made available through Green Jobs, Green New York. We need to speed up. We're coming to the end of an hour. Next slide, please. There's a lot of numbers. I think what I've captured here is some information that Donovan was talking about. Within Oneida County here, the list is by county. We have a total number of housing units, and then the number of those housing units that are heated with fuel oil, propane, and electric resistance heat. These are the low-hanging fruit. What we get then towards the right-hand side of this table is what the total number of those housing units and a percentage of those housing units out of the total for each county. And you see an average of 43% across the Mohawk Valley of the housing units are on expensive fossil fuel heating systems. Doing some back of the envelope, just go back one second. Back of the envelope calculations, if you were to replace all of those low-hanging fruit households with a 3.5 ton heat pump system, you're looking at a $3 billion market for heat pumps just within the Mohawk Valley. Let that sink in for a sec. Next slide, please. Other highlights. There's a map of empower contractors across the Mohawk Valley region. I apologize, I couldn't locate a boundary to overlay of the 6 counties that make up the Mohawk Valley region. You can see a cluster in Utica. We don't have enough contractors to meet the need for the LMI community. And so we expect to spend a fair amount of time at Heat Smart Mohawk Valley recruiting contractors to empower and assisted home performance. And also to help LMI contractors partner with heat pump contractors so that we can take advantage of hopefully soon to be announced, significant investments in heat pumps for the LMI community. Next slide, please. And actually part of the seed programming is also making solar for all available to all eligible households. And you can see under the map there, the list of eligible criteria for folks who can save not a whole lot of money, but something, and it certainly helps move the needle on solar installs and across New York State. Next slide, please. Commercial sector, I should move a little bit quickly. I'm not going to do a very deep dive. We expect to create a variety of outreach to the commercial sector to help explain, similar pathways, but in the lingo that commercial entities understand, as well as bring the specific incentives that are available to commercial entities to the table. Next slide. I just wanted to share this quickly with folks. This is actually data that came out of an energy survey that was recently submitted to commercial entities in Otsego County as part of the Otsego County Energy Roadmap. I just wanted to share the fact that one question of commercial entities was, were you aware of the CLCPA legislation? And a slight majority, slightly over 50% were aware, but a good number, 47.5%, had never heard of the CLCPA, which is not insignificant and important, especially as commercial entities think about replacing their equipment. We also wanted to find out if commercial entities were aware of the slew of NYSERDA incentives that existed out there, and about 40% were unaware of the list of programs that are there. I will say that we were pleased to see that 40% actually were familiar with Heat Smart Otsego. So we had some name recognition. We had gained some name recognition in the county, which is good. Next slide, please. Our work is cut out for us on the commercial side. And finally, I want to actually just give a nod to the fact that we're also trying to put together a package of funding and expertise to commercial entities to assist with assessment and upgrades to building ventilation, particularly in response to COVID, and guidance being given to through ASHRAE and NYSERDA for upgrades to ventilation in response. Next slide, please. So if you'll indulge me and everybody, we've certainly gone over an hour. I've got about 5 or 10 minutes of case study data that I'd like to roll through if you're interested, and then I'm happy to take some questions. Next slide. Thanks. Efficiency case. This was a home in Gilbertsville, 2,600 square feet. The residents could not get the heat above 63 degrees. It was a young family. Next slide. Energy audit was done. Infrared camera showed no insulation in the sidewalls. It was under insulated in the attic. Ice dams were pretty significant. Had a 20-year-old fuel oil furnace. Had a very leaky blower door test. Dense packed sidewalls, flash and fill in the attic, reduced air leakage to the outside by 32%, foamed the rim joists. Next slide. Added cellulose to the attic. These folks were able to cut their fuel oil bill in half. Were able to pay for the total cost of the upgrade, including a replacement fuel oil furnace. This was some years ago, in less than 6 years, and were able to live more comfortably during the winter, much more comfortably. Next slide, please. Victorian in Cooperstown, mid-1800s, good sized, couple of additions, fuel oil boiler, had some electric baseboard heat. Next slide. Similar, they had some insulation voids that were found and addressed. There was insulation and air sealing done up in the attic. Next slide. Sorry, I jumped ahead. Added cellulose in the attic, 25% decrease in air leakage to the outside, and they added 4 cold climate air source heat pumps to this building, around the building. And they financed that through one of the Green Jobs Green New York on-bill recovery loan vehicles, predicted to be cash flow neutral. Actual data, next slide. They were $700 a head. So their annual cost heating with cold climate air source heat pumps was $2,800 less than their fuel oil cost. I'm sorry, $2,800 was their total savings after accounting for the increase in their electric bill. They were actually $700 cash flow positive. And so very happy. Plus, they were able to add air conditioning throughout the house and more evenly distributed heat. Next slide. Here's a case study of a residential ground source heat pump. It was an older couple, had a lot of acreage, had been actually heating their home mostly with wood, but they were leaning on fuel oil more recently to keep warm. It was costing them a lot of money. Next slide. Mechanical life was coming to the mechanical systems were coming to the end of their life. That burner actually looks pretty new, because if you see the high water mark on the inside of the shroud to that furnace, you can see that the old one was flooded out. Wet basement. Next slide. Not an uncommon scenario. The basement moisture issues had to be addressed. Next slide. These folks opted for a ground source heat pump system. This is just imagery, next slide, of process of installing the loop field adjacent to the house. Next slide. These folks spent a lot of money putting in ground source heat pump system. This is back when there was a full 30% federal tax credit. State rebates were not available at the time. Their electricity went up, but their fuel oil savings went down dramatically. So they had a net energy savings of $3,600 a year. Resulting in about less than a 9-year payback to put in this system. They no longer smelled fuel oil. It was a much quieter distribution system, and they added air conditioning to their home. Next slide. Just a couple of examples of commercial systems. This is the Revolution Solar headquarters close to Omegang Brewery. In Milford. There's 4 spaces in this 9,200 square foot building. They put in a 16-ton loop field with 4 heat pumps. They're all electric building, some manufacturing and retail. Their total bill in December 2018 was $520. Next slide. Farm Credit East built a new headquarters in Springfield, almost 23,000 square foot building, 70 big heat load. It's a beautiful building. It's not the most energy efficient, but had they gone with propane, which was their original thought, they would have spent 54% more. Or their air source heat pumps are saving them 54% over the cost of heating that building with propane. Next slide, please. Just a couple of examples. This was a retrofit of a restaurant in Cooperstown. They put in 20-ton worth of air source heat pumps rather than replace with a fuel oil furnace. Next slide. Sydney Federal Credit Union was an early adopter over 10 years ago, put in a ground source heat pump system for their 33,000 square foot building. They said their upcharge for the ground source heat pump was paid off in less than 5 years. Next slide. And I'm going to end it there. I'm sorry, we're 10 minutes over. If you're a building owner and you really want to have a conversation, you can certainly reach me, as you can see in the contact information there. And we hope over the next eight months to a year to engage in a lot more outreach that more specifically outlines specific sector pathways and how to engage and how we can help you evaluate what's best for your building. And with that, I just want to say thanks again to our other speakers tonight. I really appreciate them having come and joined us. And I'm happy to answer questions if anyone's still awake.
We have a few questions, Bennett. It was actually a little bit back when you were looking at your charts. What's the heat load for that building where you have your graph and chart based on, you know, I can go back to the slide here.
Yeah, can you? Just.
Yep. All of our case studies here. Oh, this.
So the source of that was not from it wasn't. I don't have the heat load. I just know that that building was consuming 750 gallons of fuel oil a year.
Okay. All right. I think there's one other question. Yes, everybody will be receiving a copy of the presentation. We'll also have recordings on the Heat Smart Mohawk Valley website, OCCA website, and MVEDD website. So anybody who'd like to can watch this at any time or share it with friends and family who you think might find it interesting. All right.
I'm not seeing anything else necessarily in the chat.
Nope, but everyone, thank you for joining us. Yeah, we hope that if anyone has any questions, let me move it back to that last slide so you have Bennett's contact information. You can also visit heatsmartmv.com, and that should have additional information for you. We're continually adding information, and there will be a lot more presentations that'll go a lot more in depth if anyone has questions or wants to join us. So. And Scott, did you want to say hello to everyone?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Still awake. Nice job, Bennett. Donovan, thanks a lot for coming. I know he's not here anymore, but special thanks to Congressman Tonko. It's always great to hear him. This is a great kickoff. Really appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.